Welcome to the Pylon to Pylon podcast, where we love football and hate your opinion. Joined always by your host, Skyler Burkhart. Podcast brought to you by Statement Games, where you make the statement and they pay you out for the games. This week, I'm joined by Joe Curley. What's up, Joe? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
So, Joe, you're new to the podcast here. Let everyone know what you're about, what you do for California, for where you're from.
Sure. So my name is Joe Curley. I'm a longtime staff writer with the Ventura County Star. I've covered high school, college, and now pro football for the better part of 17, 18 years out here on the West Coast. I've covered, everything from high school to JC, a lot of JC level out here in California, to covered USC and UCLA for a good 10 years. I've covered the Rams the last 3. Obviously, since they've been out here, I've done a little bit of the Chargers as well. My newspaper is owned by USA Today, and so I do a lot of stuff with the Rams and the Chargers for USA Today Network as well. In fact, that's what I covered the Rams-Packer game on Sunday, and one of my pieces was a USA Today piece. So everything from especially this time of year in the fall, we basically cover every level of football in Southern California, and this is the big time of the year. I'm just leaving a couple practices for some high school playoff action. We've got some of the bigger college games coming up, and certainly maybe the game of the year in the NFL this week with the Rams going out to New Orleans.
Yeah, I posted a vote out there on Twitter, and actually that got most of the votes. Out of almost 200 votes that I had, 74% said that the Rams and Saints actually was the game of the week over the Patriots and Packers game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the Rams and the Saints have certainly looked like the 2 best teams in the NFC. The Packers, I think, looked really strong last week in the Coliseum because they had that extra week of preparation. I think the coaches did a really good job of preparing, for the Rams, and they had a good game plan, which kind of kept the Packers kind of in the game. But certainly, I think the Rams' biggest test of this season so far is going to be, going into, the Superdome against Drew Brees in that environment where, a lot of great teams, a lot of Super Bowl teams have gone and lost because it just is, trying to beat Drew Brees in that dome is one of the tougher situations in this league. And so I think that's why, a lot of people are kind of looking at this game as maybe the game where, where the Rams are going to get that first loss. Well, I think they're actually surprisingly an underdog. I think it opened at -1. I think the Rams were expected to go the rest of their season as a favorite, but it shows you how tough it is to go into New Orleans and win when the undefeated Rams open up as an underdog on the road.
Yeah, definitely no doubt there. Let's dive right into the regular season, though. Recap of Week 8. First off, we have on Thursday Night Football, Dolphins against the Texans. Dolphins came in as the favorite, I believe, in this game, and Texans showed up strong, even though with losing Will Fuller with the torn ACL, and they ended up beating the Dolphins 42-23.
I watched that game. That was Houston looking like the offensive juggernaut that a lot of people thought they would be earlier in the year, but that certainly kind of put the Texans back on the map, and one of the reasons they probably made the big move today that we'll get to later.
Excellent. Eagles against Jaguars in London. Eagles pulled it off 24-18 after a poor performance by the defense on the Jaguars.
Yeah, I was asleep for that game.
I think we all were.
It's 6 a.m. out here. So, certainly the Jags are reeling after looking like maybe the favorite in the AFC early in the season, and they're a mess. And really, the Eagles, still kind of scuffling, but kind of doing what champions do, which is win when you don't play well.
Exactly. Ravens against Panthers. Ravens came in here as the favorite to win, but their defense wasn't enough to stop Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey, losing 21-36.
Yeah, I think the Panthers may be the sneaky team in the NFC, really, starting to come on and, really putting themselves into that, pile of teams that may be dangerous come playoff time.
Definitely NFC is stepping up their game, and Panthers are adding on to that. Going to the AFC now, we have Broncos at Chiefs. Broncos lose a close game, 23-30. Mahomes was just too much for this Broncos defense amidst a lot of controversy going on with the Broncos coaching staff and offensive system.
Yeah, the Broncos are kind of funny. I can't figure out whether or not they're, whether or not they're good or not. I mean, they do seem to have a ton of pieces. Philip Lindsay obviously has had a really big year. They became a seller at the deadline today, but I actually like a lot of their young pieces, and they're kind of a dangerous team. And obviously the Mahomes show kind of continues to pile up. That was one of the games we were watching in the press box at the Coliseum for sure.
Next up, staying in the AFC, we got the Browns losing to the Steelers 18-33. Steelers offense comes back to life and really starts putting on a statement show in this game here.
Yeah, James Conner continuing to show the Steelers that they don't need to pay Le'Veon Bell in the short term, and the game that finally got regime change in Cleveland. So we'll see how what kind of settles. What they look like, after all their changes. It's interesting. After all the ups and downs over the last couple of years with the Browns, yet another loss to Pittsburgh is what finally kind of is the last straw and kind of gets Hugh Jackson thrown out in the cold.
Yeah, it always happens against the Steelers. It's what Twitter's been showing here. I think it was the last 6 years, whenever the Browns lose to the Steelers twice in a season, they fire their head coach and start new.
Well, it wasn't 2 losses. It was a tie.
Yeah, right.
My favorite thing in the NFL.
Favorite thing. We made that very clear in this podcast. We do not like ties. There's got to be a better system for it. I mean, it's just a funky number.
I disagree.
Next up, we got division rivals for us Rams fans here. Seahawks beating the Lions 28-14. Really a kind of, I want to say, crappy game to watch because it was really slow for most of it. I did watch this game, and the Lions just seemed like they couldn't get anything done on the offense, and they kind of faltered at the goal line a couple times.
Yeah, I think Seattle is one of those teams that's shown me that they're better than I kind of expected them to be going into the season. You look on paper, and they're certainly not the team they once were, but they do kind of play over their skis a little bit. They they obviously led for a lot of the game against the Rams earlier up there, and they're so that may be a sneaky tough game in between kind of bigger games as the after the Rams. I think they're coming to the Coliseum right after the Saints game, so that may be tough, kind of a sneaky tough matchup for the Rams going forward. Seattle, I think, has been better than I expected them to be this year.
Their defense is playing a lot better. Their offense is starting to gel, so it really is starting to work for them. Next up, going to NFC-AFC matchup here. Buccaneers lose a close one right at the end of the game by a field goal, 34-37, after Jameis Winston was benched for throwing 4 interceptions, and Fitzmagic comes back and brings him back into the ball game.
Yeah, the return of Fitzmagic. Certainly, I think the Bucs games are some of the more entertaining games on Game Pass or on the package or however you consume the NFL, simply because they are kind of fly by your seat offensively and defensively they do have a lot of weaknesses, so they are kind of just one of the more entertaining games to watch because they do have a ton of talent. And the points flat. They're net, like they showed this game that they were 3 scores down in the 4th, came back, tie it, and then they lose. I think it was an overtime, right? So that they were right at the end to a field goal. So, really just another really entertaining game with Fitz. And so we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Winston is continued to be benched, or if they go to Fitzmagic, and what sort of impact that has, because the Bucs have enough talent where they can really take a chunk out of some of these teams in the second half of their schedule.
They actually did release today that they are going to bench Jameis Winston for this next game, and Fitzmagic will start. Yep. All
right, there you go. Pick them up on your fantasy teams. There's some big time point opportunities.
Exactly.
That quarterback.
Next up, we have Jets at Bears. Kind of saw this coming. Bears win 24-10. That defense is hard to beat, and Trubisky's starting to get the ball rolling here. And Jordan Howard looked good in this game. About time we saw him get some fantasy points for owners.
Yeah, the Bears are interesting because I think they're a solid team. But you had that big. But the problem is, I think the Jets are so up and down. There's sometimes where you think they turned a corner, and then the next game they go out and put a complete dud out there. And you should look at the big Tariq Cohen play where he's basically untouched for 70 yards, and the Jets are supposed to be a pretty decent defense, and they just make just mental mistakes and blown assignments, and they're just not consistent. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why the Jets haven't really been able to kind of get it together. And the thing about the Bears is that they do have, now I guess Mac didn't play, right? But they, I think they are one of the more, that's another interesting game at the end of this Rams schedule that could be kind of interesting on the road. I think the Bears are a really solid team, although when you watch Trubisky, I still think I feel like he's got a long way to go as a quarterback. He does seem to he reminds me maybe of Goff early last year, where he would kind of have a couple errant throws per game, waste a couple downs, and it just wasn't as consistent as you'd like. I guess second year quarterback, he's going to have some issues.
Definitely. Next up, NFC division rivalry, Redskins versus Giants. Closer game than most thought. Redskins pulled out 20-13. Giants just on a huge slump, just kind of look like they're lost here.
Yeah, the Giants have everything but what it takes. All that talent they have offensively, and they are still, even though they're a mess. I think it's going to be really fascinating going forward to see how they use Barkley and Beckham and Ingram together. I mean, I think you could argue they're one of the more talented offenses in football. They just, but it goes to show, just when you're a mess at the quarterback position, your weapons don't matter. And Washington, they just scream mediocrity to me. They're just, they're kind of just held together with baling wire, and they really don't scare me as, if my team was playing them. I just think they're going to, they're not going to beat anyone good, and they're going to beat the bad teams. They seem like a forever 8-8 team at this point.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Next up, surprising Colts beat the Raiders 42-28. Colts offense has been alive the last couple games, especially with the return of Maryland Mack. Yeah,
they've put it all together. The offensive line suddenly has gone from a mess to one of the best in the league, and that's one of the reasons why Marlon Mack has been so good these last couple weeks. And they're getting Jack Doyle back, so you've got multiple tight ends now that are kind of dangerous in that system, and they're kind of sneaky good right now, kind of putting it together. So maybe the Colts are back on the map.
Next up, we have another NFC division rivalry here. Probably the worst game of the week, in my opinion. I actually had to sit through and watch this with my buddy. 49ers versus the Cardinals. Cardinals pulled out late, 18-15. I mean, this game was hard to watch. Cardinals defense swarmed the crap out of C.J. Beathard. I'm pretty sure they sacked him over 5 times easy. And this Cardinals team just looks like it has it put together on defense, but its offense is still a question mark, even with the new staff.
Yeah, they're one of those one-sided teams where, halfway through the year, one side starts to moan at the other side and the whole team kind of collapses. But the Niners are funny. They're, some of these weeks they've been, ever since they lost Garoppolo, they have been able to be effective offensively and put up some big points, but obviously back-to-back blowout, or not blowout, but back-to-back disappointing performances against divisional foes. I mean, it's almost like they're kind of better off packing it in and kind of adding talent to that roster, getting some high picks and just writing off this season. It's interesting when you got, the Cardinals kind of almost should be in that same situation. So even though Arizona won that game, I think I'd rather be a Niner fan in that situation, where I think that the Niners are probably better off having lost that game than the Cardinals for having won it.
Definitely. 100% agree with that. They both need talent on offensive side of the ball, and 49ers need a little bit extra on defense. Game of the week here. It was America's Game of the Week, and definitely my favorite to watch. Watch the whole thing. You were live at the game. Packers versus the Rams. Rams win it out on a fumble from Ty Montgomery, now shipped off to the Baltimore Ravens. 29-27 Rams pull it off in the Coliseum.
Yeah, like I alluded to earlier, I mean, I think the Packers did an excellent job using their bye week to prepare and put a game plan together, and they really, really blitzed Jared Goff kind of into submission in that first half. The Rams, you could tell that it was really a Todd Gurley centric, running game plan in the first half, and the Packers were able to get off the field on third down, and the really interesting thing was that when the Packers were up 10-0, it was actually the Rams' first double-digit deficit of the entire season. And I think when you've got an undefeated team, you want to see the way they respond to when they do have a little bit of adversity. And I think certainly you liked from a Rams perspective, you liked the way that they went into the locker room. And well, first of all, they obviously turned it around on defense and special teams, made some plays to kind of dig out of the hole even before the half ended. And then once they got to the half, you really liked the adjustments at halftime, much better, I don't want to use the word game flow, but, certainly they were, the momentum was certainly on the Rams side for much of the second half. And then, we were down there. I was probably about 20 yards from Ty Montgomery when he took the ball out of the end zone. Certainly sealed his fate as a Packers player with that fumble, but just a tremendous play by Ramik Wilson, by, what has been one of the most effective special teams units in the NFL for years and years now under Coach Fossil. And, that's kind of what made the Rams, the number one scoring team in the league last year, was just the way all three phases really played together. I think it's one of the reasons why, they're the last undefeated team in the NFL, because, when the offense struggles, the defense picks them up when the knockout, drag-out fight like they were last year in Jacksonville. Special teams comes up, makes some big plays, and turns the tide. And, it was just a really unique game, obviously, with a unique atmosphere, with all the Southern California Packer fans there, loud and proud. We knew it was going to be. I went on a radio program in Green Bay earlier in the week and predicted that there was going to be 35,000 Packer fans there. I think we kind of figured out that it was probably closer to 40. We think it was maybe 50 to 55% Packer fans, which really made for a college type atmosphere, which is really memorable and fun. And it's part of what makes Los Angeles, Los Angeles. I mean, you look at the World Series, the same night, I mean, it was full of Red Sox fans. So, it's just kind of what you have in this market. But the Rams are handling it the right way, because they're winning, they're signing their stars, they're building, a marketable team and building a team that people want to pay money to see. And so, all in all, I think you can't have nothing but optimism for where this franchise is and where they're going.
Oh, definitely. Rams are on the up right now, and hopefully they're going to continue that next week against the Saints. Speaking of them, though, the Saints beat out the Vikings 30-20. We'll touch on this just very quick. Saints and Alvin Kamara just look like they're on the same page. Drew Brees barely even needs to throw the ball to win games. Even though the Vikings played a really good game and Kirk Cousins still is playing lights out, I mean, just not enough to take down the Saints.
Yeah, like I said, they're tough. tough inside, even though I think that was a road game, right? They're tough in that environment. And, obviously Drew Brees feels comfortable. I think the defense, which wasn't really playing very well early in the season, I think is playing better as the season's kind of gone on. And then even though the Vikings, I think we expect to be one of the better teams in the league, they're obviously not 100%. And I don't really think they've really kind of hit their stride yet. I think they're one of these teams that maybe can kind of improve in the back half of the year and go on and make an impact in the postseason. But certainly the Vikings haven't really put it all together yet. So, good for the Saints to kind of have, get that win going into the Rams game, keep momentum, going into that game. And I think, I'm really excited for this matchup this weekend.
Definitely. Last game was Monday night game. Patriots beat the Bills 25-6. Bills defense actually kept them in check for most of the game, but it's hard to stop Tom Brady and the Patriots. So they end up winning it 25-6. Bills struggling. That's all I can say, really.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what that game would have looked like if the Bills could actually kind of put together a functional NFL offense. And, I think, I was joking with some friends that it was just one field goal after another for both of those teams. And I think the Bills defense, obviously they had the Patriots offense kind of pegged and they knew what was coming, and they played really well for about three quarters, and of course the Patriots kind of made some big plays. I mean, that was a game that was 12-6 pretty deep into the fourth quarter. But once the Patriots got two scores ahead, you knew there was no way that the Bills were going to be able to score a couple touchdowns to make it interesting. So, you wonder why that game, I guess it was Thurman Thomas night, which is why they put it on Monday Night Football, because I know there was too much reason to have that game be a national game besides that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to go to injury roundup right now. Just kind of go through some of the major injuries around the NFL from Week 8. We're going to start off with Tyreek Hill. Ended up getting a groin tweak in his leg. Not sure how severe it is. It may kind of linger his speed, so they're going to be watching that throughout the week. Will Fuller actually tore his ACL on Thursday Night Football on his right knee. He is out for this season. Redskins offensive tackle star Trent Williams actually dislocated his right thumb. He had a cast after the game, but during the game, he was able to pop it back into place and continue to play. So they don't think he's going to miss any time, but they're going to see before Atlanta for Week 9 if he's going to play. Last one, David Johnson was evaluated for a concussion late in the fourth quarter, ended up being fined by Steve Wilkes, saying that he's going to continue to play. And really the last couple big names here, Kyle Long, goes card off to the locker room with a right foot injury. He actually is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. That came out by Adam Schefter earlier today. Ronald Jones had a hamstring injury, did not return. We're not sure when he's going to come back. Reuben Foster, linebacker for the 49ers, had a hamstring injury and did not return. They're going to be watching him throughout the week. And then our last one, Ronnie Stanley for the offensive tackle for the Baltimore Ravens, injured his left leg and missed one full series before returning, so he should be good for the rest of the week. Anything big injuries on there you're worried about, Joe, for the rest of these teams going into Week 9?
Just Tyreek Hill, because I got him on a bunch of my teams. But besides that, no, I mean, I think it was a pretty normal week injury-wise. Certainly feel for Will Fuller because, he was really coming into his own. I think it affects that offense. And, begets the trade that came down today. But besides that, I think that's good.
Jumping into our main meat here, Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley finally were fired. It was kind of surprising that Todd Haley was fired, but then we have Hugh Jackson that was finally fired. And we even got word that Baker Mayfield wasn't exactly too heartfelt that he was fired. Kind of seemed like more on the happy side that he was gotten rid of. Yeah.
I think it seemed obvious that was going to happen at some, it's interesting that Cleveland kind of showed so much loyalty to Jackson after, some really rough years, and interesting that they continued to kind of let him, attempt to put this thing together even after they had finally kind of seemed hit like on their draft with Ward and Mayfield. And now they do it in mid season, which kind of, you're kind of going to be wasting the second half of this year. But I love me some Greg Williams quotes. So the more Greg Williams in front of microphones, the better, I guess, from my perspective.
No kidding. I mean, the Browns has just been a mess all year, just because the head doesn't seem to talk to the foot is what we're going off of here, just because Baker Mayfield's trying to do everything he can, but the offensive coordinator doesn't want to listen to the head coach and vice versa. Kind of saw that a little bit in Hard Knocks this year, where Todd Haley just seemed to roll his eyes every time that Jackson even opened his mouth.
Yeah, I like Todd Haley as an offensive coordinator, but and it is kind of interesting that they jettisoned both of them. I guess it was a dispute over how some of the offensive players were being utilized, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a really detrimental thing to do, kind of in the middle of the season. I think you really have to look at the at the Browns front office and wonder, they need to take some culpability in this as well, that they stuck with Jackson in the offseason and they're halfway through this year have kind of ripped it all up. You wonder if this is going to set Mayfield's development back, and you wonder if this is why Cleveland kind of continues to be Cleveland.
Last thought on this. Hugh Jackson, does he get another job in the NFL, or is he done? And then is Todd Haley getting another job in the NFL?
I think Todd Haley certainly can continue to coach in the NFL. I know he's got a lot of connections and a lot of people, and Jackson was a somewhat effective coordinator as well. I don't see him obviously getting another shot as a head coach. I thought it was really, what was the stat? It was like however many years Bill Belichick would need to lose in a row to have his winning percentage drop to where Hugh Jackson's was. It's like years and years and decades worth of losing to get it all the way down to, in the 200s where Jackson's is. But I think certainly both of them can continue to coach in the NFL, but I don't see either of them ever getting a head job.
Yeah, I definitely agree. With Winston being benched, where do we see this Bucs team? Because that was the big reaction this week when we found out that Winston was going to be benched for Fitzmagic in Week 9. Where do we see Winston going, and where does that really take the Bucs?
Well, I mean, if you notice, a lot of times with Fitzpatrick, they get a little boost, but it doesn't really kind of continue. Certainly the Bucs can put up points. And are going to continue to kind of be a fun aerial attack. But, I don't, I just think it's a shame for the franchise because, certainly they have a lot invested in Winston, but, you just can't continue to turn the ball over the way that they have on offense and compete in this league. It's certainly exciting and fun and wild, and it's like what do they call in the NBA? The exciting teams to watch are like league pass teams. I think the Bucs remind me of like a league pass team in the NFL. They're certainly one of these teams that you want to watch their games because they're exciting and they're wild, and you never know what's going to happen. And Fitzmagic can be really fun, but in terms of the success of the franchise, that doesn't seem to really be taking them anywhere, and you wonder where if Jameis isn't because his contract expiring, and you wonder where that takes him if he's going to go somewhere else. Certainly one of the more talented players and probably athletes in the league, but really somebody who just if you turn the ball over. That was the big thing about Jared Goff last year. One of the reasons he made such a big strides between his first and second year in the league was that I think he was the best starter in the league in terms of protecting the ball and not throwing picks. And if you can be exciting and productive and do everything you can, but if you turn the ball over too much, it's worthless in this league. And I think that's where they are as an offense right now there.
Definitely agree in that. Winston just turns the ball over too much, kind of gets over aggressive and overconfident in his throws and makes it look like he can't read a defensive system. When he goes out there, he's like, oh, I can read the field, and he just makes these arrogant throws. He's overconfident is what it seems like to me.
Yeah, he's just a turnover machine.
Well, we're going to go into our last part of our main meet, kind of the big special we got here, considering we're both Rams fans. Rams are 8-0, and it feels really good to be a Rams fan and say that. I mean, we haven't had that happen since the early 1900s almost, it feels like, where we're a dominant force once again, almost like in the early 2000s when we were the greatest show on turf. It's nice to feel that way once again.
I mean, I think it certainly is a special time for Rams fans, especially considering it's only 3 years removed from the team returning to California, and all the Rams fans that stayed true to the team in the 20 years that they were in St. Louis. It was one thing to get the team back, but to have it be competitive again after the kind of annual frustration of the Fisher years. I think the penance of having to deal with all those losing seasons was getting Sean McVay and getting that hire right, and having one of the more exciting coaches in the league, young exciting coaches in the league. I mean, I think the big thing about Sean McVay is look at the fortunes of everyone that this is a franchise that had when Sean McVay was hired, Jared Goff was here, Todd Gurley was here, Aaron Donald was here, Les Snead was here, and now less than 2 years later since his hire, all four of those guys, their fortunes have just been tremendously transformed. Obviously the first place you have to look at is just the change that all the changes that Sean McVay has brought to Thousand Oaks and everything that's that he's done. I mean, it's there's that crazy thing this week where he was linked to the Browns job, and you saw ESPN Cleveland asking fans if they would trade 2 first-round picks for him, and I started laughing because it wasn't like 100%. It was actually, I think they were mostly against it, which shows you how little Cleveland fans with all their losing have kind of learned about the NFL, because I'll tell you right now, the Browns have wasted first pick after first round pick after first round pick after first round pick, spending 2, 3, 4, 5 more picks on a guy that's going to make everything better. Would be, not that it's ever going to happen, but I think it's pretty interesting to talk about. I think whatever, put it this way, I don't think the Patriots regret giving the Jets the picks that it took to get Bill Belichick. 20 years later, that's still the smartest thing Robert Kraft ever did.
No, I definitely agree. Rams 8-0 is a great feeling, and it's definitely a time to rejoice. We got a tougher part of our schedule coming up with the Saints and going back to Seattle, and especially the Bears. No one can really sleep on the Bears, so it'll be definitely great to see what the Rams can do with the rest of their schedule. We're going to jump into our trade recap part of the show, where we're going to go and break down everything that happened today over the trade deadline. I mean, it was crazy, the trade deadline was, but I feel like it could have been crazier. There was a lot of players left on the board that I feel like could have been traded to other teams, and they just didn't pull the trigger. They kind of slide off like, well, on second thought, we'll hold on to them. To kind of start it off, Broncos traded Demaryius Thomas and a 7th-round pick to the Texans for a 4th and a 7th-round pick. So they swap 7s, and then they get a 4th-round pick. And I think that's kind of a lower-end deal, but I guess he is 31 and has a big cap hit. But Texans look a lot better with Demaryius Thomas in the wide receiver group.
Well, obviously that is a move which was necessitated by Will Fuller's injury. And it shows you how much Demaryius Thomas has receded, that you don't really get the confidence that, that the offense is still not as good as they were when Fuller was healthy, because I think Fuller at this point is a better receiver than Demaryius Thomas. But, certainly it gives them, kind of longer big play target to fit in there. Just another guy that opposing defenses have to worry about. Maybe keep this Texans offense on the roll they're on. But, 4th round pick is isn't anything to sneeze at. I mean, it's a pretty hefty price for a guy like you said is older and expensive,
and has some drop issues as well.
Yeah, more than just a little bit of drop issues.
I kind of put it out there with Cowboys on their Twitter, and I said it's kind of funny how all these players are getting traded for 4th and 3rd round picks, these wide receivers. And they give up a 1st round pick for Amari Cooper, and they're just freaking out. And they're like, oh, no, it's a stupid idea. I was like, well, in actuality, Demaryius Thomas and Cooper are the same player. One's just older than the other. I mean,
Exactly.
You know what you're getting in Thomas. You don't know what you're getting in Cooper at this point. I mean, he's so inconsistent.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. The reason why the price for Cooper was more expensive was because of his age and his potential. But, it certainly was a lot. 1st round pick for Cooper certainly looks like a foolish decision. But, we'll see.
Yeah, I definitely think they could have got him for less, but teams are just trying to outbid each other for Cooper at that point. Speaking of wide receivers, the Lions traded Golden Tate to the Eagles for a 3rd round pick. I was really surprised they ended up moving Tate. And I know a lot of other analysis were really questioning why the Lions did that, because they had a great wide receiving trio, and to just give away Golden Tate, one of their main weapons, is kind of a surprise.
Well, 3rd round pick was the biggest or one of the biggest prices doled out today. A 3rd round pick is a pretty decent price for an expiring contract. And, Golden Tate, one of the better slot receivers, one of the better possession guys in the league. So that certainly, improves Carson Wentz's weapons. They seem like they do have a million receivers in Philly. So, so good for them to continue to kind of do what they did last year. Make another big move at the trade deadline to bolster the offense. And again, the Lions have all the. You got to understand that they have a first-year head coach in Matt Patricia, and they're still probably trying to turn over that roster and make it look more like his style of team. And they had a lot invested in that receiving core. And, you do have to we'll talk about, how it affects the team later. But I mean, like you said, they have, Marvin Jones coming off a big game. Kenny Golladay looks like, a future star. And so they have plenty of weapons for Matt Stafford there. Go ahead and grab, I have no problem with them, grabbing a draft pick for an expiring asset.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of on the lower end of the trade market here, Packers trade Ty Montgomery to the Ravens for a 7th round pick, and not just in 2019, it was in 2020. And I kind of heard this on the radio on Doug and Wolf on the way here, and they were saying this was a statement trade, saying how much they didn't want him there and kind of what he did to lose that game for them against the Rams. Kind of like, we're done with you. Here's our statement. We didn't want you that bad. We didn't want to waive you. We want to make sure you're gone.
Well, as somebody who was in the locker room after the game there, I found it really interesting that, Mike McCarthy kind of threw his player under the bus in that scenario. I mean, it was probably why you knew he was kind of on the outs. Ty Montgomery saying, revealing publicly that he had told him to stay in and his job was to stay in, and he, putting the loss on his shoulders. And you had you get to see the replays of the way Aaron Rodgers and some of the other Packers responded to the fumble. Because I think as people who follow the Rams, you have to really look at, to me, it's a big contrast, because I don't think to this date we haven't seen Coach McVay stand up in front of the cameras after a game and throw any of his players under the bus, or even, blame them, even when it's, an easy blame. I mean, I think that's kind of what, part of what makes Sean McVay is he steps up there, he takes the bullets for his team. And part of the reasons why I think that locker room rallies around itself, because they know that, their coach is there, kind of backing them up. And Ty Montgomery has been on the outs all year. Certainly he's been the third string back there. Somebody who has moved over from the receiving aspect, receiving core, it hasn't really kind of worked out. It's interesting they even got anything for him. And it'll be interesting to see what the Ravens do with him, because he is somebody who's, he makes one mental mistake in this game, but he's somebody that's got a versatile, kind of diverse skill set. Somebody that can kind of inject some life into, that Ravens offense, although really, you don't really see them using him. They don't really have a ton of guys that they've used in that, those kind of slot, kind of passing back sort of. They don't really have a piece like that. So maybe it adds something new to the Ravens offense. We'll see. That is kind of, at second glance, maybe a little more interesting move than I thought earlier today when I saw the news.
We'll touch more on that in fantasy because I had a couple of people ask me some questions about it. Packers, sticking with the Packers trade HaHa Clinton Dix to the Redskins for a 4th-round pick. Kind of a Redskins statement saying, oh, I see that you got Golden Tate and Amari Cooper. I'm going to raise you one of the best safeties rated by Pro Football Focus in my backfield now to kind of match that.
Sure. I know some Packer fans that were pretty upset, but again, expiring asset, grabbing a mid-round pick for him. Those mid-round picks are really valuable, especially if you've got an aging roster and you want to inject some talent. So, yeah, I have no problem with the Packers, even though Dix is one of their better defensive players, giving up that if they've decided that they're not going to pay him, they're not going to resign him, get that pick and move some younger players into safety. Safety certainly one of the more positions in the field that you can, coach up somebody in the short term and paper over some cracks and get through to the end of the season maybe without a marquee guy there.
Probably one of the biggest trades of the day from what I've been seeing from around Twitter. Jaguars trade Dante Fowler to the Rams for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Not in the same year, 3rd round this year and 5th round in 2020. A lot of people said the Rams won the trade deadline.
That was my tweet.
With this trade.
That was my tweet. I tweeted that the Rams won the offseason. They went unbeaten the first half of their regular season, and then obviously, possibly won the trade deadline. That was the biggest package. What was it, a 3rd and a 5th? Biggest package doled out for anybody who moved on this deadline. So you could argue is the biggest piece, and certainly rush end edge has been the biggest hole on that defense. Certainly the place where they could really upgrade. Fowler, somebody who hasn't obviously lived up to his draft status, but somebody who has talent, can certainly contribute to this Rams defense. Certainly can make this defense significantly better in the short term. Who knows whether or not the Rams are going to spend any money to re-sign him, or if this is just an expiring asset. And again, so they had a couple extra 3rd round picks. You spend one of those, spend a 5th to get somebody who, it's just another example of the Rams being all in on this season, really trying to make a fist of going to the Super Bowl and returning to Atlanta, going to Atlanta and, doing everything they can to get that Lombardi back, and being ahead of the game here with the stadium in Inglewood being a couple years away. The stadium is not ready, but the team might be fully cooked and ready to go.
Definitely agree with you on that. Could be cooked and ready to go. We're going to touch now on the Week 9 predictions, who we think is going to win-loss for this Week 9 matchups. We're going to start Thursday Night Football. It's going to be Oakland at San Francisco. Who do you got in this one?
Oh, boy. Can I pick neither? I'm going to pick a tie. I'm going to say Oakland and San Francisco are going to tie on
Isn't it funny how the Thursday Night Football games started out so good this year, and then the Sunday night games were bad, and now it seems kind of flipped now, where Thursday night's going back to kind of the worst game of the week.
Well, everyone's got to be on it, so you're going to have a couple bad matchups. I mean, and hey, if in an alternative world, you got Garoppolo and Gruden works, and that's a really good matchup. So you can see what they were thinking when they scheduled it, but. They
tried. They tried very hard.
Did not work.
I'm going to say San Francisco, and I think it's going to be a close game. Both these teams really don't have it together, especially with San Francisco with the injuries. I think San Francisco wins this maybe by like 6 points.
Okay.
Next one, this is one of the probably the best game in the morning. It's going to be a big division rivalry, AFC North, Pittsburgh at Baltimore.
Baltimore kind of reeling. Pittsburgh's got the offense going again. I'll go Steelers.
I actually think Baltimore's going to win this one just because their defense is really good. And, who knows what they're going to do with Montgomery. And, they have a good run game. They kind of pounded on the Steelers earlier. So I think Baltimore wins this one. Next one here, Jets at Miami. Who do you got in this one?
Those are two teams really been up and down. I'll go Miami because they're the home team, but yeah, it's a game I probably won't watch.
I think I'm going to go Miami too. I mean, they're so up and down. That offense can really get it going in the pass game. If they could figure out how to run the ball right with Kenyon Drake, they could go so far and be a way better team than what they're given credit for. So I'm going to take Miami in this one. Okay. Another morning game, Atlanta at Washington. Kind of an underrated game. I think it's actually going to be a good, close game. Atlanta's got a lot of firepower, and so does Washington on offense. Washington does have the better defense just because Atlanta has the 3 big key injuries to their 3 main starters. Right. I actually think Washington gets the win on this one, and Adrian Peterson has another big day.
All right, I'll go the other way. I'll pick Atlanta on the road, getting their season going.
Finally. They always start out slow. They have the talent, but they just can't get it together. Another division rivalry, Tampa Bay at Carolina.
Carolina.
I'm going to take Carolina. Tampa's a mess. Carolina's got it going. And, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, once he gets going, it's hard to stop. Mm-hmm. I mean, this one is just – I put out a tweet earlier about this one. It's Chicago at Buffalo. And I said, all right, it's Nate Peterman starting. How many interceptions is he going to throw this game?
Wow.
And majority of the people are saying over 4 interceptions. I'm like, no one has faith in you. I'm sorry, Nate Peterman.
Yeah, I'll go Chicago. I agree, too. Although I don't have a ton of faith in Mitch either. But, yeah, I'll go Peterman. I'll go the Bears.
How many points do you think the Bears will score? Because let's not, kind of ignore the fact that Buffalo is one of the better defense in the NFL.
Yeah, they look good against the Pats. Weather may be a factor, too. Yeah, well, we'll say the low 20s.
Low 20s? All right. Yeah. Here's another underrated game, I think, just because the high power of the offense of the Chiefs really takes it away. But Chiefs at Cleveland. Cleveland obviously has a better defense, and Kansas City has the offense. Who do you think wins this one?
Yeah, I have no idea what the line would be on a game like that where you've got a whole new staff in the middle of it. But, yeah, certainly you got to take the Chiefs. The question is just how much they're going to win that game by.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Chiefs, too. The defense of the Cleveland's really going to slow down Mahomes just to give Baker Mayfield a chance. Another division rivalry, one of the better ones of this week, I think is actually going to be one of the better games to watch in the morning, is going to be Detroit at Minnesota.
Say that again. We'll cut out.
Detroit at Minnesota. One of the better games of the morning, the last one.
Huh. Yeah, I'll go. That's one I got to think about. I'll go Minnesota, but I think that's, like you said, that's a competitive game that goes down to the end.
I think it's Minnesota as well, just because it's hard to stop Thielen. He has been a monster. I mean, he's going to break the record this week for most straight games with 100 yards receiving, which he tied this last week with Calvin Johnson. So I think he breaks that, and he has another big game, and they beat Detroit this week. Mm-hmm. Another good game. Not a lot of people think this is going to be a good game just because it's Seattle and they don't play well, just by the eye test. But the Chargers go into Seattle in an afternoon game at 2:05 Central Time. But I don't know who wins this one, actually. I'm kind of looking back and forth, and they've both been up and down. It's hard to say.
I'm going to pick another tie. I'm going to pick a bunch of ties. I'm all about the ties this year.
Oh my gosh.
Deep in the overtime. I think that's such an even matchup. I can't decide. I'm going to go tie.
I think I'm going to give the edge of the Chargers just because of Phillip Rivers. It's hard to deny him and what he can do with that offense, especially if they get Melvin Gordon going. That's going to be the key of the game, is getting the ball in his hands.
Yeah, hopefully he's back with that hamstring.
So with this game, afternoon game, the revenge game, Houston versus at Denver, where Demaryius Thomas is going to get his revenge after being traded.
That's amazing. I didn't know they were going to play each other already. Wow, that's a good game. I think Denver's better than their record. I know their DVOA is better than their record. You know, their yeah, I'll go Denver with the upset. I'll say without Thomas, the anchor of their team is lifted, and Cortland Sutton lifts off. Let's go. Yeah, I'll go Denver. I'll go Case Keenum.
I'm going to go Houston. I love me some Deshaun Watson. Having my fantasy team, same with DeAndre Hopkins, and adding a big, valuable piece in Demaryius Thomas on the other side, and especially if QT comes back healthy, that's a wide receiver core you got to watch out for. So I think I'm going to give it to Houston. They're going to put up some good points against a strong Denver defense. Game of the week here that we've all came to vote for on my Twitter, LA Rams at New Orleans Saints. This is tough being a Rams fan saying that we're going to win this confidently, because in my predictions for Downtown Rams, I actually put the Rams at 14-2, and this is one of the teams I had them losing to.
Yeah, I'll go Saints, and I'll also explain why that's a good thing. Because, you know, in this league and in everything, you learn more from a loss than a win, and it kind of resets your season. I think 8-0 has been a tremendous run, but I think it makes, even though a win here, you know, would really put them in good shape regarding that number one seed, which is why it's probably a big, you know, really one of the more important wins of the year. But, you know, it is really tough to beat Drew Brees in the Superdome. And, yeah, I'll say Saints in a close one. I'm not confident, but I think it might be a good thing for the Rams to reset that streak. So
I'm going to have kind of an if on mine. If the Rams sack Drew Brees more than 4 times in this game, they win. Showing from these last couple of weeks, if you get to Drew Brees and you put him under pressure, he's going to make mistakes, and he's not an outside the pocket quarterback. So you got to get the pressure onto him. And if you do that, you can win this game, because that's going to throw off the run game a little bit, and that's going to open up big opportunity, especially for this opportunistic defense of the Rams. So if it's over 4 sacks, I think they can win it. Under that, it's going to be a close game.
All right, makes sense.
The night game, everyone's big rivalry matchup. Only the second time they played against each other. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady going into Foxborough, Green Bay versus New England.
The GOAT and the mini GOAT.
But which GOAT is your GOAT?
What? That's a whole nother question. You know, I think Packers really, showed me something last week. But you know, I'll take the Patriots. I think it's actually Aaron Rodgers' first game in Foxborough, because I think he was injured the last time the Packers were there, 8 years ago now. So, you know, really significant moment for both teams. I think the Rodgers won when they played in Lambeau 4 years ago. So, you know, pretty big for Brady to they got to win over Rodgers head to head. So we'll see. I think it'll be a good game, though.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game. I'm going to go with New England as well. It's just hard to beat New England, especially in Foxborough. And if they get Josh Gordon going, it's a whole different ball game. And Gronk should be healthy for this one, and that's going to be a big factor, because I don't think the Packers really have an answer for Gronk if he's playing that game. Mm-hmm. Last game, Monday Night Football, Tennessee at Dallas. Not really much to talk about. Both teams not really good teams either way. Dallas been a huge disappointment all year. Tennessee looked like they were going to be a hard team to beat. And, I mean, they can't get a run over 2 yards to save their life, and Mariota is just paying the price for it.
That's 2 of the worst teams to watch in football. I'd pick a tie, but I think I'd rather pick a cancel. I think they're so bad, I'd rather the game was canceled. I'll say, oh, man, I was going to pick Dallas, and I can't even get the words out of my mouth. I'll go Titans, but yeah, That's got to be one of the worst Monday night football matchups of the season. That's
a lot. Any Dallas game has been a bad game this year, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Tennessee because their defense is great. Dak's going to make mistakes. It's going to cost them the game. And I think, even though Dallas is a really good passing defense, I think Mariota is going to get it done and try. And hopefully the game plan is get that running game going with Derrick Henry, and they can win this out. It's going to be close, but I think it's going to be Titans on this one.
All right.
Perfect. So we got our win-loss for week 9. We're going to jump into the favorite part of the segment here. I love talking fantasy football, and I know you do too, Joe. We're going to go start off with our sit of the week. Who do you got?
I'll go every receiver who was traded today. I'll go Demaryius Thomas. I'll go Golden Tate. And I'll go what was traded today? I'll give you those two. I think two guys that are going to have to learn new offenses, two guys that are entering busy kind of workloads. Let's sit all these guys that moved at the trade deadline. That are going to have to suit up for their new teams with their lives thrown into the air. Let's do that.
I'm actually going to throw a curveball out there. I'm going to say sit Drew Brees on this one. These last couple weeks, he's been on and off. And I think it's going to be one of the games where he's off. He's not going to get you the 20 points that you're looking for in fantasy. So I look to start elsewhere. I wouldn't be the stupid fantasy owners that started Winston over Watson because, why would you sit Watson? Winston throughout his whole career has been up and down. Yes, he had 1 or 2 good games this year, but that's not enough to all of a sudden start him. So I'm going to say sit Drew Brees, and I'm also going to say sit Christian Thompson right now just because of his injury. He hurt the other side of his ribs this last week, and they're unsure of his status. So if he does play, it's going to be limited once again. We're going to go into starts. Who's going to be your start of the week?
Let's continue on this trade deadline situation. And, I love the big news today was not who was traded away, but who was kind of freed up by these moves. I think if you're an Aaron Jones owner, if you're certainly a Kenny Golladay owner, and if you're a Cortland Sutton owner, this is an absolute season-changing sort of day. I think all of those guys, get huge bump ups in value off of today. And those are guys with high talent that had bad situations, and now the situation has changed, and now those 3 guys can really kick on, move forward, and really help you not just this weekend but the rest of the season.
I'm going to agree with that. Cortland Sutton, Kenny Golladay are my 2 starts of the week. I'm also going to say Deshaun Watson. Even though it's a good Denver defense, he's got his new weapon in Demaryius Thomas. He's been playing well this season. He's in the top 10 for fantasy scoring for quarterback. Keep Deshaun Watson on your start. Don't sit him over Jameis Winston. He's not even starting, so don't start Winston. No. Another good player. Let me see. I had another one on the top of my head. I would say Kerryon Johnson. He's almost a must start every week. For the last couple weeks, I've been saying that. Even going against a strong. Exactly. He needs to get in the end zone, but his receiving, in the passing game, that's where he thrives. Even in the late game where the game's kind of getting away from the run game, he still gives you the value. So I'm going to start him against the Minnesota Viking defense. I'm not scared of them, and these division rivalries, it always is high scoring at some point.
All right.
To kind of wrap it up, who's your sleeper of the week? What's the one player that's kind of under the radar you're thinking of starting this week?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a lot of wins, and he's on a bye, and so I'm streaming a quarterback this week, and I think I'm gonna opt for Fitzpatrick. I think I may try to ride that thing another week. Because I do love the receiving core, and they do put up points. I think I heard a great stat. I forget who said it, but if you amalgamate the 2 quarterbacks, just the Tampa Bay quarterback would be the number 2 quarterback in football behind Mahomes in fantasy football. So, I think that's an opportunity for you. If you have, if you had, like me in a lot of leagues, you have Carson Wentz or somebody else. It's a 16 bye week this week. Mm-hmm. So, you're going to have a lot of quarterbacks out there that, a lot of teams out there, they're going to have to replace their quarterback. And I think, if you can get on the wire and get Fitzpatrick, I think it's either him, there's some Baker Mayfield if he's available in your league. I'm trying to think of who else, but then again, you don't want Mayfield with the new, having lost his OC. You don't know what they're going to look like offensively. I think that's a big question mark going forward, at least in the short term. So I'll say him. I didn't have one, ready for you, but I definitely have been thinking about Fitzpatrick in a couple leagues this week.
So for my sleeper, actually, shout out to Logan Bell, one of my friends that hasn't been on the podcast yet, writer for Dallas, writes for the Dallas Cowboys and Last Word on Sports. He said that Jack Doyle is a good pickup this week.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Not to start this week, but to pick up as your sleeper going forward, because he's coming back off his injury, and that's going to bring you more fantasy value. Another one I got here is actually going to be Jordy Nelson for Oakland. I know he's been really inconsistent, mostly not putting up a lot of points, but the San Francisco defense gives a lot up to wide receivers. So he's a good sneak pick just to start this week. And even Tyler Lockett as well, going against the Chargers. Their defense hasn't been playing as good as it should. So that's a good start this week, kind of under the radar.
I like it. I like the Doyle pick, especially since Luck's thrown like the majority of his touchdown passes to tight ends. Ebron's had a huge year this year, but getting Doyle back in the equation. I got Ebron in a couple leagues, and I'm thinking about switching to Doyle. So that's a good call.
Exactly. And they can run the 2 tight end sets. So both of them could be valuable, just like in the Pittsburgh system where Jesse James and Vance McDonald are both driving.
Yeah. Good call, man.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us on the Pylon to Pylon podcast, Joe. It was great having you. Where can everyone find you if they liked hearing you talk and some of the stuff you've been saying? Where can they find you and read your articles and whatnot?
Yeah. So, like I said, I work for the Ventura County Star, which is vcstar.com. Also, some of my stuff's in USA Today, my Ram stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat at VCS Joe Curley. That's Curley is the last name. So VCS JoeCurley. Follow me and tweet at me, and I'm usually pretty interactive on Twitter. Skyler will co-sign on that.
Definitely. It was great to have you, Joe. Thank you guys for listening to Pylon podcast, where we love football and hate your opinion. You can catch us on iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud. We also on YouTube as well. So subscribe, leave a review for us. We love having that review. We want to expand out to iHeartRadio and also at Spotify as well. So hit us back, share with your friends. We love to be in your home and, give you this fantasy football advice and also just kind of wrap up the week for you guys. So share us along. Thank you guys. We'll catch you again next week. College episode will not be out this week, unfortunately. We're missing a couple guys, so we'll bring that back to you next week. Richie and Donnie will join us again. And once again, guys, have a great one.